What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the world according to Briggs. Let's talk about states that the rich folks seem to be avoiding. A survey done by Charles Schwab asked people what they considered rich. Most people felt that anyone having a net worth of over $2 million was rich. That meaning your house, what you got in the bank, all that combined is at over $2 million. These people also felt that you made it out of the middle class if you made over $200,000 a year or $300,000 as a couple. So that got me thinking, what percentage of the United States actually makes over $200,000 a year? That gets them out of the middle class into the upper class, and by most people's standards, they would be considered rich. I went on the US Census website and found this is something they actually track, and they were kind enough to break it down by state for me. Now, I'm using the word rich sort of loosely. There's many definitions of what can be considered rich. I've seen it explained as someone that makes over 3 times as much as the average in their city or state wherever they live. I've also seen it explained as anyone that makes over $1 million a year, but for this video, we're calling people rich that make over $200,000 a year, what most people consider rich. All right, let's see what we found. Number 10, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's never been known for having a bunch of millionaires. I mean, they've had a time where they made it big in oil and stuff like that, but now that's owned by giant corporations, and no longer is it just some big mogul owning oil wells all over the state. Oklahoma also has a really low cost of living, so, I mean, rich in this state might be a little bit lower, maybe $150,000 by these people's standards, but using the $200,000 a year benchmark, Oklahoma doesn't have that many. There's a couple reasons for this. One, Oklahoma has one of the largest Native American populations in the country. And sadly, that demographic has the largest poverty rate in the United States. Also, almost 1/4 of Oklahoma's residents are under the age of 18. I don't know about you, but I don't know many 17-year-olds bringing down $200K a year. That also helps their stat. Only 4.9% of Oklahoma's population are considered rich. Number 9, New Mexico. New Mexico is always excelling in the poverty, so it should be no surprise that they made this list. New Mexico is also one of 2 states that isn't a southern state in the top 10 states with the highest poverty rate. Yeah, 8 of them are in the south, and West Virginia is the other one that's kind of in the south, but some people don't consider it in the south. So basically, it's 9 southern states and New Mexico. New Mexico actually has the 3rd highest poverty rate in the country, with 18.2% of their residents living below the poverty line. One surprising factor to them not having a bunch of rich people, 1 in 4 people, so 25% of this state, actually work for the federal government or the state government, one of them. And there's not a lot of rich people working for the government, unless you're a politician. Only 4.7% of New Mexico's residents would be considered rich. Number 8, Montana. Montana doesn't have a lot of industries that are pumping out millionaires. They just don't. I mean, the majority of their work is agriculture and forestry. After that, 1/3 of their population works in some sort of service industry, which again, doesn't pump out a bunch of $200,000 a year salaries. They just don't. Beautiful state, though. Here's an interesting fact I learned today. Montana is the only U.S. state that shares a border with 3 Canadian provinces: British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has always sounded like a new dish at Panda Express to me. I don't know why. Only 4.7% of Montana's population would be considered rich. Number 7, Kentucky. You know, when I was a kid, I always thought the bluegrass state is where a lot of rich people live. I mean, they raise thoroughbred horses there. They have the Kentucky Derby. I just thought it was a very rich state. Nah, not so much. Kentucky does have the largest amount of stored gold. They actually hold $6 billion worth of the gold in underground vaults at Fort Knox, Kentucky. But apparently, the locals don't get samples because not many of them make over $200,000 a year. When it comes to poverty, Kentucky is right behind New Mexico, and they've gotten better. In 2011, almost 20%, it was actually 19.6% of the population of Kentucky were living below the poverty line. Right now, it's 16.7%, so they're making progress. Not much, but they're making progress. Only 4.6% of Kentucky's population would be considered rich by the 200,000 standard. Number 6, Indiana. So this one sort of surprised me. Indiana's not known for heavy poverty. I mean, they got it, don't get me wrong, but they're just not one of the big 10 in poverty. If there was a big 20 in poverty, I'm sure they'd make the list. So in my research, they rarely show up on poverty lists. Indiana rarely shows up on any list. They're kind of in the middle on most stats. One stat that does stick out. A couple years ago, I was doing research on an Indiana video, and a strange study I came across was hysterical. There used to be condoms.com. Indiana, the entire state, ordered the most extra small condoms in the country. They ordered almost twice as much as the next one on the list. And I will tell you right now, I get angry emails all the time, and sometimes I get threats. I turn them over to YouTube, and that's that. Nothing ever comes of them. It's not a big deal. I got more because of that video than probably any other one. Probably a lot of dudes watching that video with their girlfriend or their wife, and I get to that point, I say that, and they start laughing hysterically, and the guy's just sitting there getting angry, jumps online, finds my email address, and types me out a really angry email with his 2 index fingers. Anyway, Indiana doesn't have a lot of rich folks. Only 4.5% of the population is considered rich, in that $200,000 mark. Number 5, Idaho. If you watch this channel enough or you pay enough attention, you know that Idaho has become a hot spot for mostly Californians looking to get out of California. They head up to Idaho. And cue the comments about don't come up here and bring your policies from your failed California thing. We get that on every single video that has to do with Idaho, Arizona, or Texas. It's nauseating. We get it. You think if Californians move there, they're going to turn your state into the next California. It's not going to happen. Good news for those of you in Idaho that feel that way. Most of the Californians moving there already vote Republican. That's kind of why they're moving there. But Idaho, like Montana, doesn't have a lot of industries that's really knocking it out of the park with salaries. So this kind of gets them low on the list. The good news is because of all those Californians moving there, they've kind of raised up a little bit. I happened to look back at 2015. Only 3.5% of the population made it over $175,000 a year. That's back then, in 2015, what they considered rich. So here in 2021, with all those rich Californians moving up there, they've kind of gone up on the list. They're actually 4.5% of the population make over $200,000 a year, putting them in the category to be considered rich. Number 4, Arkansas. All right, the rest of this list is pretty predictable. There's really no surprises here. I looked at all of them and said, yeah, that makes sense. Totally. Actually, there is one surprise. I thought they'd have less, all of them. But here we have the natural state. Naturally, these people are broke. Arkansas is legendary for its poverty and high percentage of the population seeking some sort of governmental assistance, like welfare, food stamps, something like that. Now, I will tell you one thing. My opinion is in the coming years, they're going to have a lot more people that would be considered rich by this standard of the 200,000. That whole northwest section of Arkansas is not like the rest of Arkansas. It actually has companies moving in there. It's got people working. It's turned into a really nice part of the country. Just that little section up there. Stay out of Little Rock and Pine Bluff. But the Rogers, Fayetteville area, that's doing good stuff. Oh, and Springdale too. Every time I've mentioned this area, I don't mention Springdale. And then I get people, well, what about Springdale? It's up there too. Okay, Springdale, Fayetteville, and Rogers. Actually, Rogers is home to the first Walmart, opened there in 1962. And today, their headquarters is right up the road in Bentonville. Only 4.2% of Arkansas's population is considered rich. Number 3, Alabama. Like I said, very predictable. Alabama's been broke since right after the Civil War. And for those of you in Alabama, stop typing. You lost the war. Alabama is ranked 7th when it comes to poverty rate. They actually have 16.13% of the population living below the poverty line. They got about another 50% living just above the poverty line. Alabama isn't completely bad. I really like Mobile, and I also like Huntsville. Those are 2 great cities. Montgomery and Birmingham have some great history, but where Alabama shines is their lack of rich people and their poverty rate, at least for this list. Only 4% of Alabama's population makes over $200,000 a year, making them fall into the rich category for this video. Number 2, West Virginia. I love West Virginia, so it's hard to really say anything negative about the state. Sad reality is they got a lot of negatives going on there, and it's too bad. Great people, beautiful state, that it's just in bad shape. I mean, it's getting better than it was, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years ago, but it's still in bad shape. Loss of coal mining, the opioid crisis, they've been through the ringer and they've been pounded on pretty hard. Charleston is one of my favorite cities to visit on the eastern side of the country. And like I've said before, they've got WTSQ, a community radio station in Charleston. I know the people there. They're great. So it kind of breaks my heart that they're number 2 on this list. West Virginia's poverty rate, they rank number 4, with 17.54% of the population living below the poverty line, and a lot like Alabama, there's a whole bunch of them living just above the poverty line. The good news is everything in the entire state, from food to entertainment to property, is all pretty cheap. So I'm sure if you're making over $100,000, you could live like someone making almost $200,000 in just about any other state. Here's a couple interesting facts about West Virginia you probably don't know. The median age in the state of West Virginia is 40. West Virginia has the oldest population in the United States. I used to think it was Maine. It's actually West Virginia. Also, West Virginia was the first state in the entire country to implement a sales tax. So we have them to thank for that. Remember everything nice I said about West Virginia? Just knowing that they're the ones that started sales tax. I'm not on board with the whole West Virginia thing anymore. Just kidding. I still love the state. But in West Virginia, only 3.4% of the population would be considered rich. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link down below for that one. Also, there's a link for our website if you want to go check that out. They'll have a lot more on it in the coming months. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Mississippi. Are you surprised? If you are, I'm actually surprised anyone would be surprised at this one. Mississippi has a long and inspiring history of suckage. This state has sucked since forever, pretty much since the Civil War. I mean, they even have the worst capital city in the United States. If states were Baldwin brothers, Mississippi would be Stephen. Remember Biodome with Pauly Shore? Whew, that was a gem. Only 2.9% of Mississippi's residents would be considered rich. Yeah, less than 3% make over $200,000 a year. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, be nice to each other.